Murder Vivaldi with Glenda Jackson, Denham Elliott and Gwen Watford in a bitter comedy about the relationship of two couples is the David Mercer play in half an hour here on BBC One.
The 9 o'clock news from the BBC with Michael Burke and Philip Hayton.
The world's worst oil field disaster, 164 dead. The men who escaped from a shattered platform and a burning sea. The cause, the gas leak that blew Piper Alpha apart.
Also tonight, a bomb blast near a swimming pool in Belfast injures 6 people. The mansion that was the key to the missing millions from Britain's biggest robbery. And 3 families start test cases against the Cleveland doctors after their children were sent away.
Good evening. It's now clear the explosion that ripped a North Sea platform apart was the world's worst oil field disaster. 164 men are almost certainly dead. Only 16 bodies have been recovered. A task force of naval and civilian ships is still searching 700 square miles of sea around the Piper Alpha platform tonight. But with dusk falling now, hope of finding anybody else alive is gone and the search is about to be called off. A short while ago, the American operators, Occidental Oil, said a leak in the gas compression equipment led to a series of massive explosions. Most of the off-duty shift were burnt to death in the accommodation block. Those working had no chance to use the lifeboats, but threw themselves at least 100 feet into water covered in burning oil. 68 were brought ashore alive. The Piper platform was one of the oldest, the biggest and most profitable in the North Sea. The explosions split it in two. Tonight the fires in its wreckage are still burning. This report from Clive Ferguson.
The day after the explosions and fire which ripped through Piper Alpha, a thick pall of smoke hung over the scene of last night's tragedy. An escape of gas from a compressor is now thought to have brought about the virtual destruction of the platform, riven by the force of a series of blasts. One half has disappeared. All that remains, the severed supporting legs, still burning even today. Fears of further flare-ups hampered attempts to deal with the fire, and justifiably. The blaze demonstrating its destructive power, with flames shooting hundreds of feet into the sky. Ships that had converged here last night today continued their sweeps of the waters. The search now extended to an area around the platform some 20 miles by 34. Tributes were paid to the part played in the search and rescue operation by everyone, from warships to tugs to helicopters, even fishing boats. Everyone had tried to save life regardless of risks to their own. But one eyewitness on the nearby support rig, the Tharos, said in spite of it all, the men on Piper Alpha stood no chance.
We saw some of the men running up the drill derrick, and we saw men waving frantically on the heli deck.
And then what happened to them?
Well, then there was a big explosion, a massive big ball of fire, and we could no longer even see the heli deck.
We were told that men were actually jumping 200 feet into the water.
Where we were, it's no use me standing here telling you any lies, we couldn't see because of all the flames. But the flames that I'm talking about, I wouldn't doubt that men would jump 200 feet. When they said that we couldn't see, I wouldn't doubt it at all. Had it been me, I'd have been doing it.
As hope began to fade, the enormity of the human tragedy distressed even the professional rescuers.
Because of the job we do, you basically try and stay detached. You know it's going to be confusing. You know it's going to be not chaotic. I mean, there's going to be a lot of confusion, and you know that really you're going to get there. People are going to say, right, we've got a Nimrod there who's got the communications now, and everybody's going to start talking to you. So you tend to detach yourself from the actual incident and concentrate on the job. And the job is trying to efficiently organise the assets you've got, really to save as many people as possible. So it's probably won't be till later on today that I'll actually think about almost the human side of it, because we're more concerned with the very personal side when we get there. So you stay detached to get the job done efficiently.
Although the cause of the accident may have been a gas leak, the platform's owners, Occidental, remained shocked that the result was so catastrophic that the men had no time to use any planned means of escape.
Our men would always wish and hope to be evacuated by helicopter. That was plainly impossible. To the best of my knowledge, no men evacuated by lifeboat. And that is an aspect of the situation that we will obviously want to get a very much better understanding.
Those who work on the platforms and rigs have long learned to treat the North Sea's hostility with respect, but for a long time to come, last night will cast a tragic shadow over these waters.
The men who died on the Piper Alpha platform were in the living quarters. The men who lived were up and about working. Many of them had to jump 200 feet into a burning sea to escape. One of them said it was over the side or die. Not one of them had time to get into a lifeboat. 23 of the survivors are tonight in Aberdeen Royal Infirmary suffering from burns and broken limbs. The condition of 2 of them is described as serious. Michael Macmillan has spoken to some of the survivors and those who are caring for them.
Aberdeen's medical teams worked throughout the night. There was no shortage of volunteers to tend the helicopter rescue shuttle. They were prepared to handle several hundred survivors, but the operation they'd rehearsed so many times could help only 67. This man was exhausted after an escape which involved him jumping 200 feet from the platform into the sea. At Aberdeen's Royal Infirmary, where 23 men are still in hospital, families waited for news and survivors recounted their ordeal. How did you escape?
Jump off the pipe deck.
You jumped onto the water?
Yeah.
What happened then?
I was in the water for a bit now, then got picked up by a standby vessel.
What did you see?
Flames.
The inferno and the smoke was so much that the people, they tried all the exit doors from the accommodation to get out onto the rig and get into the water or the boats or whatever. But, you know, they were beaten back at every opportunity. Believe it not, the jib of a crane, you know, toppled, and that made a bridge, you know, that we could get along to the edge and jump into the water from there. You know, it was fry or jump, so it was jump.
Mr. Mochan, who's from Glasgow, suffered burns to his hands. He says lessons can be learned and that they hadn't access to equipment to fight the fire.
Control room, which is the nerve centre, went down right away, which operates fire pumps and all types of things from remote control positions. And when it was blown to smithereens, the fire pumps were out of the game, you had no water to fight it with, that type of thing.
In the hospital wards this evening, some of those who were more seriously burned. These men found themselves jumping into a sea of oil which had been ignited within minutes of the explosions. Their injuries will take many months, if not years, to heal. One of the plastic surgeons here treated the victims of the Bradford fire. Alistair Matheson was flown out to a rescue ship last night to give emergency treatment.
Many of them, if not all, had been burned, and several of them had received injuries when they either jumped from the platform or were blown from it in the explosion. One of the problems that faced them was that they could not find an area of sea that was not on fire to jump into. But eventually one did manage to locate an area of sea that they thought they could safely jump into. And 2 of them went into this area of sea and they more or less assisted each other to the boat.
Questions then for the Energy Minister. What were the government's immediate intentions?
Well, precisely what has been done over the period of the last 2, 3, 5 and 7 years. That is to say, to continue to ensure that the safety standards which are set down are properly adhered to.
All day, families have been consoled. They know that the hospital does not expect any more survivors.
I don't remember any of the folk I was with recognising anybody from the ambulances. And as time went on and the long gaps developed, sadness and a bit of despair set in.
The knowledge that their fathers, husbands and sons were in a dangerous profession makes no difference now. There have been tears and terrible distress here today, and the industry on which this city depends is in mourning.
Occidental Oil, the owners of the Piper Alpha platform, said tonight they believed they'd pinpointed leaking gas as the cause of the first explosion. The company said initial investigations had shown there'd been a leak from a gas compression chamber directly underneath the living quarters. This seemed to have set off a series of explosions. Piper Alpha is one of the older platforms in the North Sea. Oil production first started in 1976. The platform itself weighs 34,000 tons. It could accommodate up to 240 crew. Just how large it is can be shown in this comparison with Big Ben. Our science correspondent, James Wilkinson.
The Piper platform was inaugurated 12 years ago by the then Energy Secretary Tony Benn. It's a huge steel structure fixed to the seabed, standing in 500 feet of water. The oil is produced like this. The hot gas and